Anybody who's looked for a job recently knows how annoying some of the hiring practices of these companies are and the hoops that they make you jump through. So in this video, I'm going to highlight 6 awful hiring practices that employers need to stop doing immediately. Hey everybody, it's Brian from A Life After Layoff, and today let's advocate for the job seeker and highlight some of these awful employment practices because employers seem to be out of touch with what the job seeker is experiencing in today's job market. And of course, as job seekers, we want to make sure that we're focusing on the highest quality employers possible. And I've generally found that employers that make you do the following things tend to be relatively low quality, so you may want to avoid them in your job search. But before we get into that, if you're interested in learning how to reclaim control with your job search and your career, make sure you sign up for my free newsletter. And in it, I share concise, actionable tips on how to approach your job search, your interviewing process, and your career with more conviction and authority. In other words, I'm going to teach you how to become the CEO of your career. Keep in mind, it's absolutely free. Hope to see you there. All right, so what are some of the most annoying hiring practices that I've seen employers do? And I'm sure you've seen them as well. Well, the first one is posting fake jobs to begin with. Oftentimes that job posting that you see that seems too good to be true may actually be too good to be true. And I made another video about this, about employers posting these fake jobs and the proliferation of them in today's job market. Oftentimes we can recognize them by some verbiage that might say, "This is a pipelining rec. We are not hiring at this point in time, but we might be hiring in a future point, so we encourage you to apply anyway." Pipelining rec basically means they're collecting applications for some future hiring event that they may anticipate at some point in the future, or maybe never at all. Or an alternative type of job might be an evergreen rec. An evergreen job requisition essentially is a position that is always open, and it's usually because they have a lot of turnover. So think like an Amazon warehouse where the package handlers are always being turned over. People are quitting. There's kind of a revolving door. So they may post what's called an evergreen rec. It doesn't mean that at that point in time, the job actually exists, but they anticipate that there's going to be a turnover in the relatively near future. In other words, they're trying to get in front of it. They're trying to build a candidate pool. Now, this one's particularly insensitive to unemployed job seekers, because they're bait and switching you. They'll see the job posting, they'll get really excited about it, especially if it's a job that's relatively rare or the target employer, or maybe in a location that there isn't a lot of jobs popping open. And then they put together a custom resume. Hopefully you're doing a custom resume because that increases your odds of getting a callback. But they're spending all of this time going through an application process, and in the end, the chances of them getting called are actually pretty slim. Then they see these jobs posted repeatedly over and over again, and it never seems like they actually fill them. It's probably true. They never actually fill the jobs because they're fake to begin with. So oftentimes I see these job reports that are coming out saying how many jobs are in the open market. The average job seeker just isn't experiencing that reality because a lot of those positions are part-time, they're contract or short-term, or they're fake to begin with. And that's one that I wish that employers would stop doing. The second pet peeve in hiring for me is when they ask you behavior-based interview questions as part of the application. And oftentimes you'll find this when you're applying for the job, you'll go through the first page and you'll have to fill out a lot of the contact information, kind of the standard fare stuff. And then when you click to the next page, you're met with a barrage of very detailed questions that honestly should be saved for the interview itself. And often worded, "Tell me about a time when," or "Give me an example of," or "What's your favorite or least favorite," or "Rank yourself," or some variation thereof. And sometimes companies will ask these impossible questions, which are just ridiculous questions that you can't possibly know the answer to, just to see how you react or how your thought process is approaching them. And my least favorite questions are things like, "Tell me about what makes you unique," or "Why should we hire you?" So essentially, you're screening yourself out before you even talk to a human being. To me, that's the ultimate form of lazy recruiting. Some recruiter or hiring authority out there has gotten the wise idea of asking a whole bunch of questions of every single candidate who has applied, essentially wasting almost everybody's time just to get one candidate through the process. So personally, when I see these questions being asked in an application, I think long and hard about how badly I want to work there. Next up is everybody's favorite, filling out application assessments. And these assessments can come in the form of personality profiles or even technical assessments. And oftentimes they're pretty lengthy. I personally had a company ask me to complete two 45-minute assessments just to apply to the job. And when we talk about candidate experience, which is the experience that the candidate has from the beginning of the application to the point of hire, companies who ask you to fill out long and convoluted assessments as part of the application just aren't taking it into consideration. If they feel it's necessary, a good company should wait till you're in the interview process itself before they ask you to fill out these application assessments, because therefore they're only asking a very small percentage of the candidate pool to complete them, and it's a better candidate experience as a result. I've personally worked for companies who have insisted on doing them. Recruiters absolutely hate them, but oftentimes it's the hiring teams that want to continue to do them. For example, I used to have to give out the Wonderlic to every single person. And man, it was just the biggest pain in the butt. We would lose candidates left and right because of it. And I personally am not convinced that there's any correlation between success on the job and what you score on a personality profile. The next most annoying hiring practice that companies like to do is the one-way interview. And this is kind of taking the behavior-based interview questions to an entirely new level. And if you've never been part of a one-way interview, essentially what it is that you go into this computer screen and it records you answering behavior-based questions, and you'll go through an entire interview process. And at the end, it gets filtered over to either some AI system or somebody who is reviewing them, and they'll make a decision on whether or not they want to interview you face to face based on how you answered the one-way interview. So there's no back and forth dialogue. You can't see the interviewer. You have no idea what they're assessing. And worse is that you can't get any feedback from them in real time to assess whether or not you need to adjust your interview strategy. I personally had a one-way interview with a very well-known fast food chain who was hiring for a regional role. And I have to tell you, it was very off-putting and turned me off from the opportunity. And nothing's more annoying than getting a rejection letter after you spent an hour on an interview and you didn't even get to see the person who was interviewing you. And next up is another colossal waste of time, which is completing assignments as part of the application process. You may find yourself deep in an interview process and then they spring an assignment on you at the last minute. And this can often be pretty lengthy. I've actually seen some of these assignments take up to a week for preparation, and they give you this long list of instructions. And the worst ones will ask you to put together a presentation to come up with a solution for a real problem that business is experiencing. And they'll expect you to put together all this research, put together a presentation, and then go in front of an executive committee and then present it. I mean, I've often found these to be a complete waste of time because, again, they may be asking 7 or 8 different candidates to put together these projects. And so if each person is spending a week at a time, think how much wasted time is spent by all of those different candidates when they're only going to select one. And even worse, there's a possibility that they can take your intellectual property in the form of the presentation that you submitted and then actually steal it and implement it even though they don't hire you. And I've actually personally experienced something similar to that myself, where I had to put together a very lengthy project. I was actually pretty damn proud of what I came up with, submitted it over. I only got very basic feedback that, hey, it was really great. They didn't hire me. And then about 2 or 3 months later, I happened to notice that they had implemented several of the things that were in my presentation. So again, when I'm faced with having to complete a very lengthy assignment as part of an interview process, I have to think long and hard about how many other people are in the interview process with me, what level the position is, how reputable the company is, and most importantly, how badly I want the job. Now, my solution as the recruiter, if my hiring teams insist on an assignment, I would push back and say, let's give them the assignment as part of the actual interview. You give them 30 minutes to prepare and create a presentation on a hypothetical problem, and then they present it in real time. And that is a much better candidate experience and one that I think is much more fair. The final thing that I wish that companies would stop doing as part of the hiring process, and this is something that every single one of us has experienced and every single one of us is completely and utterly frustrated with, and that is being ghosted. You go through an entire interview process, you talk to all the key stakeholders, you have a relationship with the recruiter at this point in time because you've spoken with them so much, and you think that you're a shoo-in for the job. They may even tell you, hey, you did great. We're working through some offer details right now. And then the phone stops ringing. And a week or two goes by. You're wondering what the heck is going on. You might even send them a note or two asking if there's any updates, and they never respond back to you. That's when you realize you've been ghosted. And there's a whole litany of reasons why candidates get ghosted. I actually created another video for that as well. And to be honest with you, none of the reasons are valid. And unfortunately, if you find yourself being ghosted, there's not a whole lot that you can do about it. So my recommendation here is to always keep applying until you have a confirmed offer. Preferably your butt's in a seat, and I might even wait till you're in that seat for a few weeks, and then I might stop applying. So those are some of the most awful hiring practices that I wish employers would stop. Have you experienced any of these yourself? If so, which ones have you experienced, and am I missing any on this list? Leave a comment and let me know. And if you find yourself struggling looking for your next job, that's actually something that I specialize in. I've got a website called alifeafterlayoff.com. It's loaded with tips, tricks, and resources, all from an inside recruiting professional's perspective. So I encourage you to go and check it out if you think you need more help. Anyway, appreciate you watching. We'll see you on the next one.